I don't know. I mean, I know I was really self-conscious about it, like walking around with my ass out on a set. But eventually you kind of just settle into it and you just go, that's my ass.
He's clearly using that headset for virtual reality porn.
I have severe carpal tunnel.
Slick stuff.
You're a terrible person.
Raw stuff. Welcome to the party.
Hey Tom, how are you?
Good, how you doing?
I am doing great. I have not laughed as hard as I did watching this series in such a long time. I was
Awesome.
absolutely cracking up. And I have to ask you, there's been so many great comedian created shows over the years, and they're all slightly different. For you in kind of coming up with this concept and all of these different stories and everything, did this come with any inspiration from any other series, or did you just kind of go, I've got these ideas and this is what I want to do?
Well, the way that this actually came about was that I've always loved movies, right? I love features, and it's a real thing to in order to just like make a feature, it's a pretty big undertaking if you're like, I want to make one. But making a short film is kind of like an accessible thing to do. So I've written a bunch of short film scripts over the years, and I had a break in my tour in 2022. I knew it was coming up. It was April of 22, and this was like January or February, and I was like, oh, I have a little break. I want to go make a short film. So I had like I don't know, like 10 scripts. I sent it to my friend Rami Hashash, who is a EP and a director on the series. And I was like, hey, you think we could make one of these when I have my break? And through our conversation, he ended up saying like, I think we can make 3 of these. And I was like, well, how are we gonna make 3? He's like, we'll shoot for like 11 days straight, and we can shoot all 3. It was an insane thing to do at the time, but we went ahead and did it. And so then we had like 3 short films. So like initially I was just gonna like make one and just put it out. When we had the 3, it felt like, oh, this is kind of like a show at this point, And I guess if you're thinking of like inspiration, I guess like we always kind of likened it in a way to like the old Twilight Zone, where Rod Sterling come out and introduce an idea, and then kind of take you into a story. And then I think we also like a big emphasis for me was like I wanted there to be an elevated cinematic look to everything. And so that was another thing that I think in our minds we always kind of think of Black Mirror because they tell stories, but it's like it's very cinematic. So obviously with our show, I think there's a comedic twist on things that as whereas theirs kind of dives into a different lane. But I think those were like the inspo places for us. But it just kind of also just organically developed into what it is.
And I think I definitely was thinking Black Mirror watching it. Like if Black Mirror were hilarious, this would be that
Yeah,
show. And
yeah.
there are so many of these, there's so many elements of different shorts in here that I was watching and I'm thinking this is going in a direction that I never in a million years thought it would go in. And then I kept thinking, how has nobody ever written a spy film where the assassin shits himself before? Because it is just, I was rolling, I was laughing so
Yeah.
hard. But like for you as performing this in the middle of it and you're filming it, we as an audience, we're seeing it from a different vantage point. Making it, did you know that these things were going to work as you were doing it? Or is it something when you saw the finished product, you're like, my vision is here. This is what I was hoping it would be.
Well, I mean, that one in particular, it's like, it's funny because we're talking about all these different stories we want to do. And I was like, oh, I've always wanted to play like a spy type of person, right? Like a Bourne kind of guy. And then you go, well, yeah, but our show is like this it's a comedy. So like the fun thing of that one is, the turn of like you start off like sexy and cool and then it just falls apart. I did not know how well the pantless stuff would play, But then when I was watching it in a screening and at the premiere, it landed so well that people are horrified, but they're also laughing really hard. And I was like, oh, okay, this did actually work out. Like at the moment, I can't say that I don't know. I mean, I know I was really self-conscious about it, like walking around with my ass out on a set. But eventually you kind of just settle into it and you just go, that's my ass. And you don't know how the response will be.
And I think watching all of these, I kept thinking as I watched each episode, I'm like, okay, this is going to be the one that I want to talk to Tom about. And then the next one, there was another one. And there's just constantly all of these work so well
Oh,
and they're so
awesome.
funny. I think that the bar keeps raising, in my opinion, as I'm watching it. So, the double shit, the French twins, like all of these are
Yeah.
just they're so the line is somewhere where I think back when I was a kid watching a TV show or watching a comedy, there are certain lines that you could not cross. It was just the way that things were. It would have to be an independently produced thing. You wouldn't expect it to see it on a Netflix that they're going to go to this level. Were there ever any points where they said you can't go there, you can't have the giant dick, or was it you can't call out Steven Seagal? Like, where was there a line where they said you're going too far, if they did?
They really, I gotta say, they didn't really do that. They were very supportive. Um, I remember that when we were editing the coffee shop one, they were like, "Hey, we're a little concerned about how violent and gruesome this is." And I was like, "Okay." And I think they had us like, I don't know, like kind of we just cut it a little different. I mean, it's all still incredibly violent, that story. So they obviously like supported it. They didn't really tell us not to do anything. They were like, yeah, this all works. They were like, don't say the N word. That was pretty much it.
And with the I think the one that kind of jumped out for me with the Steven Seagal is getting the chance to say all these big famous movie stars and pretty much like calling them bitches or calling
Yeah.
telling them, is there something cathartic knowing that you get to say this out loud and you get to say it in a forum where millions of people could see it, but it's not you saying it, but you still get to say, like, fuck Tom Cruise kind of thing?
Well, that wasn't scripted. That was an improv, like in the moment kind of thing, that like you don't know what's gonna make. There's so much that it is not in the cut, and it just felt like that would be to me that felt like something Steven Seagal would say, like
Yeah.
that he really would be like, I'm the best, everybody else is a bitch, and it just kind of came out in that moment, and it made the cut. Yeah, it's always fun to like say uh outrageous or insulting things under the guise of like I'm playing a character, I love Tom Cruise and
Yeah.
then those and Steven or in Statham, and I think they do like really fun, cool movies. But it is fun to play. It's always fun to play an asshole, like that's a really fun thing to do.
there's there's a lot of things that I was wondering how much was scripted versus how much was improv in the moment, and then there's little things that are kind of peppered throughout that I'm wondering, did this just kind of come to you after the fact when you're editing things together? There's a scene where it's the two deaf guys fighting and it's subtitled "Deaf Guys Fighting."
Mhm.
Is that something that was scripted, or did that just kind of come, oh, we should add this in here?
That I think was added in. Deaf Guys Fighting was added in. There was, obviously we like scripted, hey, we want this to happen. We want you to say these things in sign language. But then it's an added joke to write that stuff in that wasn't initially in the script.
The When I'm thinking of like great comedy shows over the last couple of decades, I always think back for Louis was so good because he started to channel really artful films and he transitioned that into making other projects that he did that were big feature length. Is this something that now that you've done this, you're thinking maybe there's a chance that if I explore this further, it could turn into more of a true anthology style series or a film? Is that something that you have aspirations?
Well, I mean, doing this type of thing is is so fun. I mean, I really enjoyed making this, and I definitely want to do features. I have one lined up. There's a few other ones that we're taking out, and I feel like doing this series is like a great kind of rehearsal for a feature. You know, it's like even though it's all these different stories, it's like basically the same amount of time it takes to make one. Um, and it's in the practice of doing it. So yeah, I hope that it leads to the opportunity to do more of this, but also more features too, for sure.
Was there, because you said you had some of these that were already developed ahead and you incorporated them in. Then there's some things that are really timely, like the A25 trailer that's in there that is just it's hilarious. Like, and all these little moments that are on there. Was there anything that came late in the process that was added in any particular shorts that maybe were not baked in at the beginning that you added late into the process?
Well, yeah, I mean, the way that it kind of worked is that, you know, we had two of them that I had already shot made it into the series, the coffee shop and the second story in the Cyrus trilogy, which is the one where Rob Eiler runs into this house and Kirk Fox is there and there's the toilet and everything.
Yeah.
So we had to build a story around that. We had to build the beginning and the end of that one. And then some of them, some of the stories I came in with like, hey, I have a draft of this, you know, like we should do it, and we would work on it as a writer's room together. And then some came just through like conversations in the room, and we all came up with it like working together in that room. Like the A25 one, I was like, I want to play this Italian, you know, savage, and it just turned into this story that honestly, when we were first talking about it in the room, I was like, there's no way they're gonna let us make this. So I was really surprised on that one, but that came from that. And so did you know, Grandparents' Day was like one where I actually had a completely different script already written, which was that I was taking my son to visit my dad on his deathbed. And so the story kind of took place as like this confession to a kid, right? And through the conversation, that's really the great thing about a writer's room. You have all these different minds. It just came about like, what if it was presented a different way? And then once that idea was out there, I was like, oh, that's so much better to have the kid perform what the grandfather is saying in this context. So like that's the thing about a writer's room, is that like the ideas that kind of come from having these comedic minds in the room, it's like there's no substitute for it, and that just came along in that process.
And one thing that I thought was really funny in the sales conference meeting one, that whole through line and kind of the justification of that, and then that last delivery of that final line
Yeah.
cracked me up. It reminded me of Monty Python's Meaning of Life when they give that speech at the end, and then it says, "But at least I don't work for the Jews," and it's just so perfectly hilarious. And I was laughing so hard through all of these. And one thing that I noticed is that the way you mentioned the Cyrus trilogy of those, how some of these are kind of cut to do it to be continued into the next one. Was that something that came about also during the process where you decided some of these are going to be all within a single episode and some are going to bridge into the next one? How did that process take place?
Yeah, that was, you know, that came about from that room, is that sometimes you would, you know, like the sales conference one, you go, that's a self-contained story. The button on it is like a final line, right? Or like, you know, coffee shop, we actually talked about, well, you know, he walks off at the end. Like we could do like a what happened to that guy, but you know, like so you do these things, then some of them you go like the Cyrus thing, it's like we had the second story and you go, oh, we can build around this. It felt like it was a bigger story and you wanted to have a to be continued. Same thing with the Kati story in black and white. Like there's a version where you talk about how do we make it happen in just like 5 or 6 minutes, just tell this story. And you have the conversation and you're like, no, the setup is too important. You have to like know the guy, you have to empathize with his situation. And it felt like it was a great thing to have the reveal be the cliffhanger, and then hey, let's continue it. So we would have these long discussions about like what is a 2 and 3 part story, and then it was about trying to shuffle the stories in a point where you would you would end one at the end of an episode, so you would try to get someone to continue on the next episode. But it was a lot of time put into that.
And it does work really well, and I like how the kind of the Rod Serling white space sequences where those are taking place towards the end. There is the one where you get the phone call and you go, oh, I've been renewed. Was that just a line, or is there already a planned future for this series to go into a season 2?
That was just a line. I think we all had hopes even when we were on day one. Like, I hope we get to do another season of this. And yeah, that would be an awesome phone call to get. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes, but we definitely want to do more of them.
And you have a couple of recognizable faces that pop up here that you have actors that people are going to know and be like, oh,
Yeah.
you got this guy. Was there, and you obviously know a lot of people that have been in films and comedy and all of that. Was there anybody that you wanted to include that maybe wasn't available, or was that never something that kind of crossed your mind that I want this to be its own thing, and then we'll see where it goes from there?
I mean, there was a lot of like, we were always talking about dream casting for a lot of these things. And I got so lucky that, Daniela Pineda came, Shea Wiggum, Dan Stevens, Arturo Castro, Rob Eiler, Kirk Fox, Malin Barr. All these people came that were like amazing. I mean, the biggest one that was like, we had actually moved our production to accommodate was Jason Momoa. So he agreed to be the guy in the Last Wish story, the one where Bobby Lee is with his wife Rachel Bloom. Both of them were incredible, and it was going to be that Momoa comes in, and I was like, oh, it's perfect, And then he was like, I can only do it on this day, so we shifted our whole production to that day, and then like a week out, he FaceTimed me from a bathtub and was like, hey man, I can't make it. I was like, what? Put a towel on, dude. But he, yeah, so when he couldn't do it, like, you just do what you do, which is like, this is how production works. So we started to go like, oh, what about, and we had like a list of like 25 people that we were trying to get. And the longer we kept talking about it, and people would read it and say they liked it, but then we were like, there was something about it being either him, like somebody who's like a really desirable guy, or it's like, it's almost funnier that her dream is not the sex symbol, that it's like a really accessible guy who's kind of a pig. And it just morphed into like being this sandwich shop owner that I ended up playing.
And it's really, it works out. I think it's really funny. And I was also wondering from a perspective of the framing element, that it's not always at the very beginning of the episode. Sometimes it kind of fades in part way through the episode, and we get kind of what the subject's going to be. In that very first one, it kind of starts with the assassin spy thing, and then we get the framing. Those framing sequences, was there ever any thought about not having that, or was that always kind of the key? You wanted to have that Rod Serling feel?
Well, there was conversations about whether or not like it's gonna work. The tough thing would ended up being that you'd have, like a theme, jobs, success, and then in trying to like make episodes work and shuffling things, you're like, does this make sense that this story is in the success episode or the love episode or the fan? So that became a thing, and then I think we all came to the point where we said, like, we're overthinking this. Like, it's a fun thing to have this framed a certain way, and not all these stories are going to perfectly hit what is the theme of this episode. But I think it's okay. Like, it was like, that's okay. We discussed what we also found is that like Netflix loved that. They loved the white psych moment of like talking to the camera. So that was also one of those things where when you have doubt, you go, I don't know, and they go, this is great. You're like, let's just go with their opinion. They think it's great. Let's just do it.
Well, as a selfish viewer, I was disappointed it was only 6 episodes. I really appreciate the level of effort that went into making this, but I would watch this nonstop. It was a
Oh,
blast
awesome.
from
Thank you.
beginning to end. I really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much, Tom.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.